Wisp Sports Radio, the voice of women in sport.
Hi, and I'm Chris Stafford, and I am crashing your show.
Perfect.
We've had you back doing Mentally Fit show now. We did, for those who are new to the show, we did a series of 6 back in the winter of 2018 on important mental health issues. And it seemed appropriate during this month of mental health awareness to catch up again because there's a lot happening. There's a lot been happening in your life too.
This is
And I think there's so many top going out speaking about mental health issues. Just give everybody just a snapshot of how you arrived in this place in your life where you've become an expert and somebody who people are calling on. You actually provide a service to people, don't you?
I mean, this is definitely not the path I had seen for myself in life. I grew up in Canada, and I had a dream. I was going to play in the Olympics for Team Canada's hockey team. And, the Coles Notes version would be that the day that I actually saw myself making Team Canada was the day that my mental illness had kind of taken me over. And hadn't been diagnosed at that point and had to work to get a diagnosis. And this would have been back near 2000. And once I was eventually diagnosed, it just... I was in a very dark place. I wasn't functional. I wasn't able to kind of go about my day-to-day routine anymore. And it actually landed me in my apartment for about 5 years. And after 5 years, I realized I needed to do something. And I started learning how to manage my mental illness and how to find a place of recovery and what tools and strategies I could put in play. And I've spent the past 10 years now traveling around the world, sharing my journey, but also focusing on helping others find strategies and working on workplace mental health, working with first responders, working with a lot of athletes on how to incorporate mental training and mental health and focusing on your mental health with your training. So it's kind of just become something that evolved into I guess, a new path in life, and it's a journey I'm so grateful to be on.
And we are, of course, as a society, much more aware of mental health issues. We address them head on more than we ever used to, of course, and this is an interesting...
we think.
Well, it seems, publicly we do. When you see the people, the well-known people, they're campaigning, you see, Prince Harry and Ed Sheeran right now just... launching an initiative. I think he's writing a song about it. There's much more public support from personalities to bring it out into the open.
We do a lot of work on the awareness piece. I'll say that for sure. I mean, we have different initiatives all over the world. You've got what they're doing in the UK there through the royal family, which is great because obviously that's a pretty huge spotlight. You've got initiatives like Bell Let's Talk. You've got different organizations who are putting together different campaigns, a lot of them stigma-based. And I guess I'll cautiously agree that, yes, we are far more aware that there are issues now. And without sounding pessimistic, I will also challenge that we have so far to go.
Oh, I've no doubt that we have a long way to go. And you see that raw edge of it too. And that's a long way between that raw edge and the public image that's being put out now in support of this, which is a good thing too, that they're fronting this, isn't it?
It is. It's double-edged, unfortunately. I mean, you're dealing with individuals who have a huge platform, and that's absolutely fantastic that they're using it for good. And I applaud them, and I am grateful for them, and I'm grateful for people who are bringing a light to it, which is causing other organizations and causing government to take more action, because that's what it's going to take. So certainly there's a place for it and there's a piece for it. The part that I guess I struggle with when I'm dealing with issues on the ground, through my organization, we do mental health in rural communities. And the flip side of that is, you have these campaigns, or you have these, I'll use this week in Canada, for instance. It's mental health awareness week. And it's awesome because you're inundated with education, and you're inundated with information that you might otherwise be challenged to find, or you might be, left on your own to navigate the wonderful world of the internet and play your own doctor to try to find that information. But the part that gets me and the part that scares me a little bit is it incites hope, and it incites hope that there's just these infinite answers available and resources. And that's the part where I feel like we have to be careful, because we encourage people to reach out. We encourage people to get involved. We encourage people to start looking for help. And all of this information and all of this, flood of social media attention brings this lightness, this hope. And then the week ends, or the campaign ends, and we're on the next topic. And those people are left trying to navigate, this history of information and these threads that existed for a week. And unfortunately, a lot of them are just information, and they aren't necessarily leading to tangible resources that are helping these individuals. And I fear that in a lot of instances, that leaves a sense of helplessness. And I'm not somebody to, point out the issues without offering solutions, but the solution is we need to, put as much into having tangible resources at the end of those conversations. And I don't think that we've necessarily met that need with any responsibility at this point.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And it may change, of course, from country to country. We should point that out. But I think generally speaking, that's what you're finding. And you are living it, right? And you are experiencing it wherever you go. And this week, as you say, is Mental Health Awareness Week in Canada.
Yeah.
But this is now we're into October. This is a time of year, you said, where you told me before we started recording, Kendra, that this is a time of year which can be difficult for people as the seasons change.
Exactly. And I mean, there's all, you're very right. There's so many different impacts on our mental health, whether it's environmental, whether it's situational, whether it's trauma, whether it's illness, there's so many factors that influence our mental health. And, one of them being seasonal affective disorder and SADS. And it's, the bottom line is, and I know it's true for myself, October is, it has consistently been a tough month for me. It's something that, I notice when the days starting getting shorter. I notice that I'm driving to work in the dark and coming home in the dark. I notice, when the trees are losing their leaves, and you know what you're in for, especially in Canada. I mean, winters can be long. And it's tough because our bodies naturally respond to that. And, it's a trick. And I mean, now we're getting into the specifics of, cognitive behavioral therapy, but it's a trip when you have to start changing your thoughts to make sure your emotions don't take over, because the effect it has on my body biologically is one that puts me in a place where, my goodness, I just want to curl up in a ball. But it's consciously having to remind myself that there's a reason for that, and the reason isn't one that will lead me to a good place. It's not just that, it's cozy and cool out and I want to be, snuggled up. It's that it changes the way my body starts to respond to my environment. And I need to consciously be aware of it and make changes to make sure that I'm putting in more effort to stay well. It requires me to respond with being more active and more engaged in my nutrition and making sure that I'm taking care of myself and my wellness. And a lot of people, we get into this whole idea that, no, it's time to hibernate. And for somebody who's living with mental illness, that's dangerous.
I can imagine. So give us some tips then to how to be proactive, how to be very aware of what's happening and accept it and know that you're going to live with it through the next season, and how best to prepare for it.
Yeah, and I think that's key, exactly what you're saying, right, is first is that acceptance piece. I mean, I could get angry every time it happens. I could get upset every time it happens, or I can acknowledge the fact that, hey, it's October. It's always October, and it's always, going to happen. And I think that, we go through these ebbs and flows when we're dealing with our mental health. We tend to only pay attention to our mental health when it's not good. And I think that's a failure. I think that if we preventatively and proactively work on our mental health the same way we would our physical health, then you can forego some of these, downs. You can really ultimately make an effect and a change on the outcome. So for me personally, I mean, my first inclination is start, cooking all those feel-good meals that load on the calories and are warm and gooey and full of everything potentially not the healthiest for me. So it's really consciously, making sure I'm getting good, nutritious meals into me. For me personally, high protein, no wheat, both affect my mood disorders. Physically active, I mean, we tend to, again, kind of pull back and become a bit more homebody-ish when we start to feel that cool. And for me, it's having to do the exact opposite. It's get out, go for walks, go for bike rides, be active. For me, get to the gym, making sure that I'm working out, making sure that there's those moments of mindfulness and checking in with yourself. Like you said, there's that self-awareness that's required in being able to say, okay, this is happening, so now what? And I think that being present every day and really just checking in with yourself on a daily basis, figuring out how you're feeling, where the chaos is, where you're feeling overwhelmed, and aligning your daily routine to support that. And I mean, we tend to get lost in things that make us feel good. And unfortunately, those can be short term, or they can take you in places where it makes it easy to give up a healthy routine. And we need to really fight the urge to do that. We need to recognize that, okay, even though Netflix and chill seems like a really great idea right now, that's just going to put me on a couch in a basement. And how good is that for me? As well, for me too, it's the, fighting the urge to be less social, because it starts to get this way, and I just want to go home and curl up and, wrap myself up in my boys and call it a day. And really, it's that need to stay engaged and stay accountable to myself to make sure that I'm taking all of the daily steps that I need to take to stay mentally fit.
That becomes harder when you live alone, doesn't it? I think if having a partner or someone around you that reminds you of that and is supportive of that, I think that's got to be much easier. But what happens when you're alone, Kendra?
I'm going to touch on both of those, actually, because there's this epidemic that they're starting to recognize the impact of what loneliness does to somebody's mental health. And it's epic. I mean, we need connection in life. We require connection, and those connections, we tend to grasp onto anything very kind of carelessly sometimes. I mean, we're willing to connect ourselves to anything in order to feel that connection. And I hate telling this story because it embarrasses me, but in honesty, I share this story because I feel it's not just an individual thing. It's a thing that a lot of people go through. Growing up, I mean, I wasn't diagnosed till my late teens, but knowing now what I know about mental illness and disordered behavior, you could have diagnosed me when I was 5. And I know growing up, I always craved that connection. As a kid, you want friends, you want parents. There's a reason we throw kids into preschool and daycare, because we have to socialize them. And then we get to a place where as we get a bit older, those connections get more intense with hormone changes and everything else. And it's, craving certain emotions and certain feelings. And I remember growing up, it was this weird phenomenon where I used to just kind of surround myself with tragedy. I used to want to be around people who weren't doing well, because that was the emotion that fit closest to the connection I was looking for, because that was what was inside me. I was feeling that sadness, that emptiness, and I didn't know it. but I got to a place where it was almost when other people were at their worst, that was where I felt the most comfortable, because I felt like it fed that need for connection. And when you start to realize that, when you start to really understand the effect of loneliness and the need for connection, for people, it's this phenomenal piece of us that we need. It's not a matter of wanting, we need it. We're not meant to be isolated. We're not meant to be alone. And you mentioned, so it's got to be different for somebody who's in a relationship or who has a partner versus somebody who's single. But I challenge you, it's quite possible to feel entirely alone in a room full of people. And so, I think that it's the quality of that connection and the supports in the connections that you do have that matters. You could be somebody who has, the hugest social network in the world, and not a single one of those people could know that you're dying inside. And I think that we need to start learning how to put a level of honesty into our connections and a level of truth. And putting that level of truth and honesty out there is going to, in my mind, attract the same type of connection that you're looking for. To try to force a connection or to try to just walk into a room full of people, assuming that will make you feel better, can end in sadness. It can end in further isolation and further feelings of loneliness. But when you put yourself out there as authentically as you can, and if you're willing to let your walls down and let your guard down and just truly share who you are, I feel like you're going to attract like-minded individuals. And I feel like that's where the best supports come from. So yes, it's possible that that's going to be your partner. It's possible it's going to be your best friend. It's possible it's going to be your family. It's also possible that it's going to be a complete stranger, and that person is going to understand you in a way that takes away that necessity to explain yourself over and over and over again, because they understand. And I think those connections are so important, because being truthful about who you are and being honest about what you're feeling, it's so empowering to be able to be in a room and know that you don't have to be okay all the time. And I think those are the connections that matter the most. And so I don't know that everybody would get that from their partner. I don't know that everybody would get that from a boyfriend or a girlfriend. I don't know that we can define just having a person in the room as being enough, because I work with a lot of people who, being home is the hardest place for them because the people they're with don't understand, or they don't feel as though they can let themselves down in that environment because there's an expectation for them to be something else. And it's just, this is something I could just go on forever, because quite frankly, they're starting to recognize that the impact of loneliness on an individual is on par with the same impact as physical issues like obesity, or, it's having a direct impact on our health, and it's having an impact that is changing our life expectancy, and that matters.
But with that, of course, has to come trust. That it could be anyone or more of those people, but it has to be born out of not just trust, but a security from within. And when you say let the guard down, but that take that back even further, you have to be comfortable. You have to feel that you can trust. It goes very deep, doesn't it?
And there's so many very complex levels to it. And absolutely, inherently, there are a lot of people in this world who are untrusting, and for good reason. Whether it's experiences that they've been through, or failed relationships or failed friendships, or moments of distrust in those relationships that really put us in a place where we are an untrusting society. And then you go beyond that. We live in a world of social media, and we live in a world where nobody's really putting forth their most honest self. Like, let's be real about it here. There's a reason that there are 5,001 apps for filters and for, it's just, we like to play with reality to put forth this best version of ourselves and this best version of what's going on in our days. And, it's untrue by its very nature. And so we hope that we can find people in the world that we feel that comfort with, and that we feel like we can be truthful about. And for me personally, yes, that's an issue. Yes, that's a problem. Yes, you hope that the people you meet in your life are going to be authentic and real and honest, but that's not always going to be the case. And I think the biggest part of that is self-awareness and self-love. And I just think that inherently, if you feel good about yourself, if you can look in the mirror and you can genuinely feel good about the person you are, then those distrust issues become somebody else's issue. Because quite frankly, yes, you might get hurt, and that sucks. Nobody likes to have their feelings hurt. It's never, that's not something we want. But if you're willing to be truthful about who you are, the people who are meant to be in your life, the people who are meant to surround you, are going to be the people you end up with in the end. And that doesn't mean there aren't going to be people who come and go because they are seeking something else, or because they are putting themselves forth as, as truthfully as they say they're being, and then you find out that that doesn't align with who that individual is. That's on them. That's not yours to take on. That's a lot of energy, and that can become a lot of negative energy. And I think that we just have to be really careful not to take that on. I was noticing on Jan Arden's feed actually the other day on Twitter. She was making a comment about just being really real on social media, and about being who you are and who you truly believe yourself to be, and standing up for what you believe in. And how important it is, because you're really not doing anybody any justice by professing to be somebody you're not, or putting yourself across to be somebody you're not. And I think it's so important because that whole laws of attraction, it's real. What you put out is what you're going to get back. And if you're fake about who you are, if you're not honest about who you are, well, that's what you're going to attract back. Or ultimately, you're going to make a connection on a level that isn't something who's true to who you are, and ultimately it won't last anyway. So I think that yes, we might get hurt. We're going to get hurt in life. There's no way around it. You're going to get hurt. But it's what you do with that hurt, and it's owning the piece that you should internalize, and letting go of the part of it that you have no control over. Because at the end of the day, somebody else's discrepancies and somebody else's distrusts and somebody else, lack of authenticity isn't your issue, and it's not something for you to take on. So I think that, you're going to get burnt sometimes, but if you're honest about who you are, and if you're true about who you are, and you're consistent about what you stand for, what you value, what you put forth, then ultimately you're going to find yourself surrounded by those people. And I honestly don't believe that there's any way to have that happen if you're untruthful. And it's tough to let your wall down. I understand it. I understand hurt. But ultimately you just have to make that choice, as is the case with a lot of things in life. You just have to make a conscious decision to let people in, and understand some are going to be there for 10 minutes and some are going to be there for the rest of your life. And it's the only way to find those people.
Yeah, it's a lot of self-awareness and self-honesty. And yeah, there's a lot there. And there's a lot more we could discuss, of course. But I think for now, Kendra, that gives people, I think, something to think about and address in themselves. So any final thoughts that, of advice that you would like to put out there at this time?
I mean, kind of my message never really changes. I'm somebody who believes we're made to be part of a community, and that community is not going to be the same for anybody. For some of us, it'll be family. For some of us, it'll be friends. For some of us, it'll be partners. For some of us, it'll be sports teams. I think just stay engaged. Stay engaged with the people that that you care about, and really recognize the importance of time, I think, because time is ultimately what forms connection. Time is what forms a good support strategy. Time and being present. I mean, ultimately, we can always chase the highs in life, but what really matters, and especially in this space, when you're dealing with mental health, when you're dealing with wellness, when you're dealing with, suicide prevention, when you're dealing with equality, when you're dealing with, just being genuinely decent people in this world, if you're going to offer your time to somebody, if you're going to offer to be a support to somebody, if you're going to be present in any form of connection, be present and be true to that, because your time is honestly the most important gift and piece of that connection that you can ever offer. And I think what we offer is what we're going to end up receiving in life. And I think that it's just so important, especially right now. And obviously in the spirit of Mental Health Awareness Week, please just check in with the people you care about, check in with the people you love, make sure that they're okay, and be willing to listen, be willing to be present if that answer is no, be willing to show up for those people time and time again. And if you're fighting right now, if you're struggling right now, reach out, please. Just don't give up. Don't give up on people. Don't give up on connections. Don't give up on support. It's out there. And sometimes you're going to have to work really hard to find it, but it's so worth it.
And how do people find you online if they'd like to reach out to you, Kendra?
There's a few ways. You could find me on Twitter. Type in Kendra Fisher. My goodness, now you're going to test me, and I can be completely honest with you. I don't know any of my feeds, which is funny, but I will check that as I'm sitting here right now. On Twitter, it's at Kendra_Fisher30. On Instagram, you can find me KFisher30. And if you go onto Facebook and type in Kendra Fisher, I have an athlete page, which contains most of the information as well as a lot of the information around Mentally Fit. You can also check out my website, www.mentallyfit.com.
Well, thank you for doing this again, Kendra. And obviously, it's important information, and there are resources out there, and we will have links on the show notes accompanying this episode. But thank you for letting me crash your show.
No, I appreciate it. Always nice to talk.